Welcome to the Humanist Perspective. I'm Nathan Buck, Communications Director at the Center for Inquiry. This program is brought to you by the Council for Secular Humanism, America's largest organization for people who lead value-rich lives without religion. What is secular humanism? Secular humanism is a comprehensive worldview held by millions, drawing its inspiration from the sciences, philosophy, and the arts. We publish a bi-monthly magazine, Free Inquiry. Each issue presents leading thinkers and commentators exploring issues of concern to secular humanists. We'd be happy to send you a copy at no charge. Simply call the phone number on your screen or visit us online. This is the Humanist Perspective. And now, an interview with Council for Secular Humanism and Center for Inquiry Executive Director Ronald A. Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Tom Flynn, editor of Free Inquiry, and I'm here with Ron Lindsay, who's quite a multiple threat person. He is both a philosopher and an attorney at law. He's been active with the Council for Secular Humanism for many years on our various legal activities, and he's recently and in rapid succession been named the new executive director of the Council for Secular Humanism and the new chief executive officer of our sister company, the Center for Inquiry. And in this series of programs, we're going to be talking to Ron about his vision for the organization, the state of church-state separation in the country today, and bioethics, a particular area of his expertise. Well, Ron, welcome to Humanist Perspective.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to see you here today. So, how have you come to have so many titles in so little time?
I think there's been a struggle within the organization to find some work that I could actually do successfully, so that may be part of the explanation.
We're remarkably charitable, it's true.
Yes, and I appreciate that charity. I think really it's a result of the expansion of the organization over the years into a number of different activities, and there was a sense that perhaps I could lend a hand in helping managing some of those activities. As you mentioned, I became executive director of the Council of Secular Humanism, and then some thought was given to perhaps it might be good if I'd also have some day-to-day control of CFI, in part to allow Paul Kurtz, the visionary founder of both CSH and CFI, to concentrate on some of the work that he does best, namely writing, research, and speaking on behalf of all these organizations.
For the benefit of viewers who may not have heard of it before, what is the Center for Inquiry and what's its relationship with the Council for Secular Humanism?
Maybe a little bit of history is in order here, because it might be best, I think, to approach it chronologically to give a sense of the relationship of the organizations. Paul Kurtz helped to found both CSICOP, the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of the Paranormal, which is now known as the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, and the Council for Secular Humanism in the late 70s. I think CSICOP may have come first, then CSH. As indicated by their names, CSICOP, now CSI, concentrated on looking to areas of the paranormal, investigating claims of the paranormal, trying to determine whether there's any foundation for those claims. Council for Secular Humanism, concentrating on advocating for and promoting secular humanism. At a certain point in time, and if you quiz me on the exact year, I'm sure I'd fail that quiz, Paul Kurtz decided that it might be good to have an organization that perhaps tied these two different wings together. And that organization was the Center for Inquiry. And so Center for Inquiry, I think, started out, at least initially, as kind of an umbrella for both of these organizations, a way of blending their activities, making the cooperation between the two organizations perhaps a little bit more efficient. But then CFI has kind of taken on a life of its own. It's become a think tank, a research facility, the site where many of the educational programs of the movement take place. And it also has started to found centers and communities, both in the United States and internationally. Centers and communities where various programs can be offered, educational programs, other programs of interest to the humanist and the skeptical community. So now we have these three organizations each with a somewhat distinct purpose and focus, but nonetheless working in close alliance with each other.
So are you planning to remain in both capacities as the executive director of the council and the CEO of Center for Inquiry?
Not indefinitely. The way things evolved, as we've discussed, I was first appointed the executive director of the Council for Secular Humanism and then subsequently CEO of CFI. Just based on the amount of time I need to devote to managing CFI, I think it wouldn't be fair to CSH if I remained as executive director, because I think CSH is a very important organization, has a lot of objectives that I'm very interested in seeing that accomplished, and it has a mission that I think is important, and we need to make sure that mission is fulfilled. So I really think it needs someone dedicated full-time to the organization. So as I said, I don't plan to remain indefinitely in both positions. I think probably sometime in 2009 we'll have a new executive director for CSH.
What? Now again, we're covering some basics here, but I'm sure some of our longtime viewers may have been watching The Humanist Perspective and been aching for someone to answer this question. What is secular humanism?
Secular humanism is, from my perspective, and actually this is interesting, and it will give you an idea perhaps of what secular humanism is about. If you ask that question of different secular humanists, you may get a variety of different answers. But I think that's good, assuming there's at least some overlap in the answers. Secular humanism, I believe, is a methodology more than anything else. We don't have dogma. We don't have a set of doctrines or beliefs that someone who's a secular humanist must ascribe to. Rather, it's a way of approaching the world in very broad terms, a way of looking at factual claims, value claims, a way of looking at how we deal with other human beings. Fundamentally, I think there are certain core principles that would help define secular humanism. Probably the most basic one is basing one's belief on evidence. Sounds very simple, and it is actually, when you look at it, very simple. But nonetheless, it's an approach, a viewpoint that most of humanity has not shared and certainly not followed for most of its history, unfortunately. As an implication of that, basing one's beliefs on the evidence, one looks at all phenomena, including religion, in terms of what evidence supports those claims. So we do critique religion because it's a human phenomenon. It's something that's worthy of examination, clearly, because of its importance. And we look at it from the perspective of seeing whether there's any validity to the claims often made on support of religion. And we do that in an objective manner, looking at the evidence, both historical, logical, otherwise, for religion. Some people think that secular humanism is anti-religious. I wouldn't characterize it that way. I characterize it as non-religious. We're not a religious organization. Among other things, we don't have a belief in the transcendent or the supernatural, and again, we don't have a dogma. But we do examine religion critically and objectively. So that's clearly part of what being a secular humanist means. The willingness to look at things objectively without any preconceptions or dogma. As I said, that applies to religion, it applies to other aspects of life as well, including an examination of our values. Contrary to the belief of some, the non-religious do have moral values. They believe in moral values, certainly the majority of them do. And if that's the case, we have to look at the question of, well, what do we base our values on? I mean, traditionally, many people have looked to religion as a source of moral values. We think that's a mistake for a number of different reasons, which we can talk about later. But if you don't look to religion as a source of moral values, where do you look? Humanists believe you should look at human experience. You should ground moral values on human interests, determine what moral norms with further human interests. So again, that is something that helps to define a secular humanist, the willingness to look at human phenomena such as religion, question of moral values and ethics, look at it, again, objectively, investigating it, trying to figure out what actually would promote human interests. those are all, I think, critical aspects of secular humanism.
I think what you just said about humanist values really ties in to what you said earlier about secular humanism being first and foremost a methodology. Because on the traditional view of values, well, we know what we're supposed to do because God told us. That's the prescription of many religions. The secular humanist approach is, among other things, more work. We have to exercise that methodology because nobody told us what's the right way to live. We have to use our reason and our compassion and common sense and look at human life and human experience, and it's a puzzle we need to work out.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not handed to us.
It's not. And actually, I think you put your finger on one of the reasons why the default perspective of many people is religious, because it is a lot easier if you just accept what's given to you. Having to think about issues, ethical issues and other issues, spend time examining them, it does require some investment of time. And it is a lot easier just to go to church and have a priest or a minister tell you, hey, this is what you have to believe. But ultimately, we think that's the wrong approach. So the wrong approach not just for the individual, but for humanity as a whole.
And certainly far more satisfying to work out a value system that works for yourself. Of course, we don't start in a vacuum. We actually know a great deal about the sorts of social structures and the sorts of moral norms that make it conducive for people to live well together in community.
Oh, definitely. And as you say, it's far more satisfying ultimately. Yes, it is an investment of time. It does require some work. But it's also a way of giving meaning to your life, because when you work on values, when you study values, when you devote the time to think about, gee, what is good for me, what is good for the community, that is a source of meaning in your life. And again, you know, the claim is often made, just like the claim is made that religion gives us our moral values. The religious are fond of saying, well, gee, without God there is no meaning. I think it's actually the other way around. Yes, the religious authorities will say, here's meaning, you know, take it with you, you take it home, and, you know, in exchange give us, some dollars for, contribution, Peter's pence, or what have you. That's the way meaning works. No, I don't think it works away. The way real, authentic meaning works, the way it gives significance to your life, is to appropriate your life, to look at things, make your own decisions, examine things, obviously in discussion with others as well. But that's how one really can make one's life one's own, and that ultimately has to be the source of meaning.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you have a doctorate in philosophy. You have a law degree. You spent a lot of time at school.
Yes, I did. I just couldn't get away from it. I do want to have a real job. What can I say?
You found it meaningful.
Yeah. Well, a part of the explanation for that kind of long academic career was based on the fact I was raised, like many people, religious. I came from a very Catholic, religious family, and that actually influenced my choice of colleges. I had a brother, as a footnote, who went to MIT. He was kind of mathematically gifted, let's say, much more than I was, that's for sure. And when he went to MIT, he began to be skeptical about religion, which troubled me greatly, because as I said, I was very religious. So I made a conscious decision not to apply to any school other than Georgetown University, because I thought, hey, it's the premier Catholic university, that's where I want to go, because I don't want to lose my faith. And of course the irony is I went to Georgetown and lost my faith. In part, actually for two things. There's actually debate, it's kind of interesting, within the humanist community. If we want to get our message across, what's the best way to do it? Should we emphasize biblical criticism? Should we emphasize philosophy? Actually, there were two courses that influenced me in college. One was a course in biblical scholarship, and one was a course I took in David Hume, the great agnostic non-believer of the late 1700s. And both of them, as I said, influenced me, moved me away from religion. And actually, at one point in time, I thought of becoming a priest. In fact, I had already been accepted at the North American College in Rome, and was planning to go there. But the fact that I realized I no longer believed in God, I thought might prove some impediment to a successful career as a priest, although I'm sure some have overcome that. So actually I found myself senior year in college not knowing what to do, so kind of the default thing was, well, I'll continue with philosophy. And I did, at Georgetown. And then, after a couple of years of graduate work, recognizing the job market was kind of tight, I decided to go to law school. Although, again, the interesting thing there, Georgetown actually had a good record of placing its graduate students. Unfortunately, they placed them in Catholic universities. So if I wanted to have a job teaching at a Catholic university, I could have pursued that and just had the PhD in philosophy. But not wanting to pursue that particular career path, I decided to go to law school.
They say that every Jesuit university has one high-profile atheist on the faculty so that they can show how sophisticated they are. But that's not many jobs to go after for the whole country.
That's true. It does limit one's opportunities. So I went to law school, which I certainly don't regret. Certainly monetarily, it proved to be a very prudent decision. And it allowed me to advocate on behalf of secular humanism in a way that I think not everyone can do, and that is to undertake cases on behalf of CSH and CFI.
And of course, that was the beginning of your relationship with the council as a pro bono attorney on one of our early church-state separation cases.
That is correct. Actually, Paul Kurtz contacted me. One of the first cases I had, when I got out of law school, I actually put myself on the list of pro bono attorneys for the ACLU. And within about a year, actually, I was contacted regarding an interesting case, a case brought by Madeleine O'Hare of some repute.
Oh, yes.
I won't say what repute. But in any event, it was a challenge to the constitutionality of the congressional chaplaincy. It's an interesting case, and I think a case that had some merit. And the reason they were scrounging around for an attorney, and I wondered at first why they picked me, because I must have been like 150th on the list, was because the brief, the document you filed with the court, was due within a week. And they couldn't find anyone else willing to undertake that task. I did.
Much less to Madeleine Murray O'Hare's satisfaction.
Right. That's true. Any rate, that case gained some notoriety, and Paul Kurtz heard of it and gave me a call, and after that I undertook some work on behalf of the council.
I wanted to say a little bit about that. It was a case involving prayers and the chaplaincy in the U.S. Senate, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. As a result of undertaking the work for Madeleine O'Hare, I became acquainted with the historical practice of the chaplaincies in both the Senate and the House. And one thing we discovered, we discovered a couple of things. One, we found out that the prayer books of the chaplains were being published at public expense. Second, the Senate chaplain, a person called Reverend Halverson at the time, used his prayer opportunity, not just to give kind of the standard, hey, God bless this house or chamber or what have you, which is what the House chaplain did basically. You usually have 5-word prayer. Senate chaplain, I guess to some extent to his credit, actually put some effort into what he had to say. They turned out to be mini-sermons actually excoriating non-believers. He would say things like atheism was responsible for the Holocaust, one can't be a moral person and believe that we were descended from apes, et cetera, things of that sort.
And then this would all be gathered into books and published at government expense.
At your expense, at taxpayer expense. And then actually the third thing we found out is that the Senate and House chaplains, actually it's a great gig because you get paid a decent amount of money. They're officers of the Senate and House. Their only official duty is actually to open the session of the House or the Senate. But even that they often delegate to so-called guest chaplains, people who want to have the opportunity to appear before the Senate and the House and deliver the opening. Well, the government, when they were defending against Madeleine O'Hare's case, made the argument, these exercises, they're not religious at all. Yeah, they take the form of a prayer, but they serve a secular purpose. The purpose being to solemnize the opening of the Senate or the House.
It sounds like having your cake and eating it too.
That's often the way the government likes to do it, and they get fed off that diet, believe me. In any event, so we took a look at that, and all three of these facts that we discovered in the O'Hare case, and we said, well, some of these things, the Supreme Court had decided that having legislative chaplains by itself was not a constitutional violation. Kind of an historical exception in deciding that case is the Marsh versus Chambers case. They didn't apply the traditional lemon test, does it have a secular purpose, does it have an effect of advancing religion, is there an entanglement with religion? They just said, hey, the first Congress had chaplains, so that's okay. We're not going to look at it any further.
Founders did it, we'll settle for it.
Right. So they kind of did a short form of that, and that was it. But they didn't examine these other aspects. So Paul and I decided, well, you know, this is worth taking a second crack at. Not sure how much success we're going to have, but let's see. So we actually had 3 separate claims. On the prayer book issue, we had essentially a settlement. There was an agreement they would stop printing the prayer books. So that was essentially what we were seeking for, so that ended that case. With respect to the remarks by the Senate chaplain, which he used the opportunity to basically preach against atheism, we got a pledge from the Senate chaplain via correspondence that he sent to Paul, and that is actually published now in the official court records of court decisions. It's in what's called the Federal Supplement. That's the official reporter for the federal district courts. As I said, the correspondence is there, and as I said, he apologizes to Paul, says that wasn't his intent, and he pledges not to make remarks like that again. So what else are we going to do? We certainly don't want to be in a position of, you know, censoring the chaplains. Too much work involved, and who wants to look at their prayers anyway? The third claim is the one we really didn't have any success on. Not unexpectedly, we really thought that was probably the weakest one. And the problem is we ran into a buzzsaw when we went to the appellate level, because the district court basically said, well, you know, there's some merit here, but I think probably based on Marsh, you know, I'm not going to rule in your favor. Mm-hmm. In fact, we thought we'd probably maybe just leave it at that, but Paul Kurtz decided, hey, let's take our chances with the Court of Appeals. And unfortunately, the panel we had, and in the federal appellate courts, what happens is you get a panel of 3 judges. We had Ruth Ginsburg, which was good, nice. In fact, we wound up their vote. But we had the 2 other judges were James Buckley, the brother of William F. Buckley, who was both a senator from New York and then later served as a judge on the D.C. Circuit, and Douglas Ginsburg of the marijuana fame, so to speak, the nominee of the Supreme Court, but whose nomination was later withdrawn. Both very conservative, and Buckley slammed us. I think it's the only way to describe it. So we lost on that. But it was an interesting experience, and as I said, we certainly achieved a favorable result on a couple of the claims we had.
That ties into what's often been a very mischievous idea in jurisprudence, this idea of ceremonial deism. That sometimes when the government does something that looks like a prayer, sounds like a prayer, it's really not. It's just a way of solemnizing an occasion. It's a way of focusing the participants' thoughts on their great work before them, or just as something that the founders did. And as the result of that is there's a fair amount of what, you know, you or I or any reasonable person would look at and say, this is government entanglement with religion, that is declared not to be because the court said so.
Yes, unfortunately that's true. And I mean, we have to face the fact there's now, sad to say, a body of case law developing that seems to say, hey, this is okay under the Establishment Clause. And I think that's just balderdash. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you know, it's no law respecting establishment of religion. There's no footnote in there that says, well, if it's kind of a non-denominational, wishy-washy type of religion, it's okay. No, it's not, and it is very troubling, and it's happening increasingly all the time. It was actually just a decision the other day in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals that governs Virginia and the Carolinas, involving, I think it was the Fredericksburg City Council, Fredericksburg, Virginia City Council, in which they talked about the practice of opening the city council meetings with prayer. Justice O'Connor, sitting by designation, as retired Supreme Court justices can do, actually I think wrote the opinion, and she essentially says that there's really no problem with this kind of non-denominational prayer. In fact, the actual lawsuit in this instance was brought by a Christian minister who wanted to have an expressly Christian prayer. He was actually challenging the practice of the city council of having so-called non-denominational civil religion prayers. And O'Connor said, hey, the city council can set it up in any way they want, because legislative prayer has been kind of given its blessing, excuse that term, by the Supreme Court. So that's okay. And if they want to limit to this kind of non-denominational, let's not offend anyone type of prayer, it's okay to do that. Totally overlooking, of course, the fact that prayer itself is clearly religious expression. If government does it and supports it, it's clearly favoring religion over non-religion. And hey, look over here, we're offended by it, you know. So you know, maybe you can come up with some prayer formula that doesn't, you know, offend Christians, maybe even Christians and Jews, maybe even Christians, Jews, and Muslims. I'm not sure if that's the case, but nonetheless, don't forget us. We're citizens too.
Even if you've got a prayer that Christians and Jews and Muslims can all agree on, well, they're the three great Western monotheisms. Right. What about polytheists? What about members of various Eastern religious traditions? It's, you know, much of these casual assumptions about the acceptability of ceremonial deism assumes a sort of Christian or at least monotheist unanimity that may have been true of the country 200 years ago, but certainly isn't today.
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, it totally overlooks the fact that we have many different religious groups. As you say, apart from the traditional monotheistic Western religions, there's Hinduism, there's the Wiccans. I mean, there's a whole assortment of religious groups out there who clearly, one would think, wouldn't be satisfied with these kind of non-denominational monotheistic invocations. And it just, as I said, it's very troubling, the idea that somehow, well, if we satisfy most of the people, that's okay. I mean, the whole point of the Bill of Rights is to guarantee the rights of the minorities, including perhaps very small minorities. Not that the non-religious are that small anymore. I mean, we are clearly a significant part of the population. Depends on what surveys you look at, how you interpret them, but, you know, roughly 8 to 10 to 12% of the population. Again, one would think that our voice and our right to freedom of conscience should count for something. And, you know, just the whole idea that somehow it's okay to have this because it doesn't offend most people, just the very wrong-headed, misguided approach to constitutional civil liberties.
Yeah, I mean, the very reason that you have constitutional civil liberties is there are some rights that are so important that they are binding for everyone and were quite deliberately put outside the reach of casual majority rule.
Exactly, exactly. And the other troubling thing about this is that, of course, especially in our system, which relies on precedent, one case builds on the other. So, you know, maybe you can say, gee, in this one instance, who cares about it? But then that's going to be used as precedent for something else. Clearly, everyone knows the Pledge of Allegiance is still an issue out there. Don't know right now how it's going to turn out. But these cases that endorse ceremonial deism, this non-denominational approach, if in fact the Pledge of Allegiance is justified, that's probably the route they're going to take. And I find that to be very troubling. I mean, the pledge is a solemn affirmation of allegiance, of fealty to one's country, and to build into that an explicit religious element, how closer of a union between church and state can you get?
Yeah, there's a big jump in the logic.
Right.
Certainly. Well, you know, looking back 70 or 80 years, it does seem that towards the middle of the 20th century, American law underwent sort of an epiphany and really recognized its obligations to deal with an increasingly religiously diverse citizenry. Realized that there were a lot of things that we used to do that were okay, that were in fact entangling government and religion. We need to have less entanglement with religion. We need to be more accommodating to a wider variety of religious minorities. Now, on the one hand, the direction of church-state jurisprudence has pretty much turned around 180 degrees, and you're more likely to see judges finding new ways to look the other way and give some church-state entanglement a pass. And yet, the last time I looked, religious diversity wasn't getting any smaller in this country. You know, as you mentioned, the non-believing community is significantly larger. Certainly the Muslim community is growing tremendously, as are some of the other non-Christian religious communities. Here we have a country that's getting more and more diverse. 60 years ago, we had a good idea for how to make the country more friendly towards people of diverse religious backgrounds, which was keeping religious expression more or less out of the public square. Now we're moving away from that. Are we setting ourselves up for a social explosion down the line as some religious minority or other, be it we non-believers, Muslims, whoever else, decides that ceremonial deism that smacks of Christianity is not something they're prepared to tolerate.
Yes, I think we are. I mean, you put your finger again right on the pulse of the issue. I mean, one of the underlying rationales for the Establishment Clause, clearly something that was of a concern to the founders, was all the religious strife that had gone on for centuries before. Religion is divisive. People feel very strongly about it. And as you point out, 50 or 60 years ago, the way the majority of judges and justices approached the issue was, well, the best way to handle this, to fulfill the intent of the founders, is to keep a clear wall of separation between church and state. You know, people, you know, on their own private initiative, they can express their religious beliefs the way they want, but you know, you got to keep government away from it. You've got to be a clear separation so there's no mistaking what is private religious speech for government speech. Now the viewpoint seems to be coming around to, well, gee, the way to handle this issue is actually to let everyone speak out, even if it's on government property, even if it's government money. And if some people get you know, a right to project their voices more because they have more numbers or get more money from the government, so be it. Well, I think that's going to lead to problems down the road because people, groups that feel left out are going to say, hey, it seems to me the government is really supporting Christianity or Christianity and Judaism. What about us? You know, we're being shut out. We're being treated as second-class citizens. And needless to say, I doubt very much the wisdom of that approach. I think it's a very, again, wrong-headed approach. It's unfortunate. And one problem we face is how can we reverse that trend? Because the federal judiciary, which traditionally has been the judiciary more protective of constitutional rights than as opposed to, say, the state judiciaries, is now much more conservative. In fact, people who are concerned about religious freedom are turning more and more to state courts because they feel they may have a chance there of prevailing with their lawsuits.
And of course the problem with that is you win in a state court and you won in that state only, and pretty soon you've got a patchwork where you've got a different, you know, you've got a different market basket of rights in each state where you might reside.
Right, exactly, and certainly once the Supreme Court decided that the Bill of Rights applied to all the states, which is actually a fairly recent phenomenon. It happened in the 1930s and 1940s as they did what's called incorporating the Bill of Rights into, or portions of the Bill of Rights into the 14th Amendment. The whole idea behind that, or one of the ideas, was to have uniform practices throughout the United States. And if in fact we're going back to a situation where, as you say, we have this patchwork of laws, how does that help anyone ultimately? I mean, it seems to create the idea of a kind of a balkanized country where in certain areas, yeah, there is neutrality between religion and non-religion, whereas in other states, maybe there isn't.
This raises a disturbing possibility. You know, you and I have both written research pieces over the years on the number of states that still retain passages in their constitutions that explicitly deny atheists the right to hold public office, serve on a jury, you know, whatever the particular case may be. What is this? There's 7 states that still have that?
I think it's somewhere between 7 and 10. And clearly, they're not enforceable. I mean, when I say clearly, if the Supreme Court continues to honor the decision in 1961, the Torcaso versus Watkins case, which indicated that, in fact, it's impermissible to require any type of religious test for any type of public position, those are unenforceable provisions. But nonetheless, they are there, possibly to be resurrected, again, excuse the term, at a later date to impede the rights of non-believers. So there's no reason to have them in there. Obviously, they're kept in there for political reasons because no one wants to make a move to take them out, because if you're a state legislator in some state that has provision like that and you say, well, I think we should eliminate this, there's really no need for it, it's not constitutional, you may not be in political office very long. So
yeah, nobody wants to take point and be the person who proposes repealing that provision.
Exactly. And they should be repealed because they clearly send a message that non-believers are second-class citizens. You know, if you have a constitutional provision invoking God, what's that say to people who don't believe in God?
Well, it says at best you're second-class citizens. At worst, it says get out.
Right.
That's the problem with any of these exclusions of individual rights under the Constitution. 30 years ago, most judges had a very clear understanding that telling an Amish student to leave the room and go stand in the hall during the pledge to the flag, or telling an atheist student to go leave the room and stand in the hall during a teacher-led prayer was not acceptable. It does seem that a great number of federal judges today think of that as a pretty good solution to a problem like that.
Sure. I mean, there is unfortunately a trend among some jurists, Justice Scalia in the Supreme Court probably is the most notorious example, who think essentially what the Establishment Clause means, if it means anything, and Justice Thomas, for example, thinks it doesn't guarantee individual rights at all. But Scalia's approach is, well, look, what it does is it prevents the government from putting a gun to your head and forcing you to say a prayer. But beyond that, the government can support religion in other ways. So, as you say, if in fact the teacher just excuses the atheist student, they can have any sorts of religious exercise they want. I mean, Scalia has hinted, were it his choice, he'd allow organized school prayer back in the schools.
Think about that. In a country where, depending which poll you listen to, 8 or 10 or even 16% of the population has no religious affiliation. Got well over 1 million Buddhists, well over 1 million Hindus. There's wide disagreement on the size of the Muslim population. It may actually be larger than the population of religiously observant Jews in the United States already. And we're all going to have one prayer in the schools, and pretty much everyone has to participate, and that prayer is going to be Christian. I can see how this turns out.
Right. Yeah, it's clearly going to exacerbate social tensions. I mean, there are enough problems in the school already in terms of keeping discipline. And to add this other element in there, I think is imprudent to say the least. I think unconstitutional, and it clearly has no justification. I mean, one of the things that I've always found interesting, I mean, and you look at all the different ways in which some religious groups, and to be fair, not all the religious groups want government support or want government entanglement with a religion. But the religious groups that do, why is it they feel the need to have this government support? I mean, are they going to disappear unless there's a prayer every school day? I mean, does religion have to pervade every aspect of our life, especially our public life? Do we need creches everywhere? Do we need monumental crosses on the hillside? I mean, what is the concern they have? It's like they feel that, gee, if we don't have this government endorsement or support, people won't believe in us. Maybe that's true, actually. But
maybe
no,
it is. But,
it is, right.
But if you really believe God is on your side, why are you so worked up about getting an acknowledgement from Congress?
Right. Especially when there's so many opportunities to engage in religious exercises. I mean, one of the biggest myths, one of the things that always galls me is when I hear this claim, and it's often repeated. It was repeated actually in a textbook that the Center for Inquiry looked into recently, and that's unfortunately used in a lot of schools, is the claim that students can't pray in school. Again, it's just wrong. I mean, it's factually wrong. There are many opportunities for students to pray. What the Constitution prohibits is state-sponsored prayer, state-organized prayer. So what you can't have is a teacher leading a prayer or some prayer that's been written by the school authorities that has to be recited. Students on their own can pray silently. They can do it anytime they want as long as it's not disruptive. So there are plenty of opportunities for prayer. Not only that, the way the case law has evolved, I have mixed feelings about this, but as you know, if a school opens its doors after hours to civic groups or what have you, it also has to do that for religious groups. So in fact, there are groups that meet and have prayer services, Bible studies, etc., on school property. As I said, I have mixed feelings about it because on the one hand, I certainly believe in religious freedom, and if people want to exercise their religious beliefs, that's fine. Unfortunately, there certainly have been some instances where those groups have taken advantage of their presence on school property and tried to proselytize using school facilities, and that was one concern that people had when schools started allowing this practice, and it has happened. So I said I had mixed feelings about it. if they actually did, that is, if the religious groups did honor the restrictions that are supposed to be placed on them, it probably wouldn't be that much of an issue. But in any event, I mention that simply to emphasize the point that there are many opportunities for the religious to express their viewpoints, to express their religious beliefs. Why they feel compelled to squeeze every minute out of the day and use it for religious purposes with state support is something that baffles me, frankly.
Thank you very much, Ron Lindsay. For the Humanist Perspective, I'm Tom Flynn.
This has been The Humanist Perspective, a project of the Council for Secular Humanism, publisher of Free Inquiry magazine. For more information about secular humanism or a free copy of Free Inquiry magazine, please call the number on your screen. From the Center for Inquiry Transnational, I'm Nathan Bupp. Thanks for watching The Humanist Perspective.